Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the GRFP 2024 Fellowship Webinar. During this webinar, our presenters are Dr. Christopher Hill and Dr. Joe Shabak. We also have Dr. Nakrisha Norman participating in the webinar. And I'd like to also extend a very happy welcome to the new 2024 Fellows. During this webinar, you may have questions. Please feel free to enter all your questions into the Q&A box, and we will try to address them as they come in. And some questions we will hold to the end of the webinar, and we will answer them live. Also, keep in mind, if you have questions that are relative just to your specific situation, you can email us at grfp@nsf.gov. Next slide, please. Today's agenda will be introductions, then we'll move on to the GRFP overview, then the GRFP fellowship responsibilities, and then we'll close the session with live questions. Now I'll hand the introductions over to our first presenter, Dr. Joe Shabak.
Oh, thank you very much, Rochelle. Apologies, but I'm going to actually read this off to make sure that we get all the information across to you in a non-rambling fashion. So the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program is conducting these webinars, and it allows the institution officials and the fellows, including you, new fellows, the opportunity to connect directly with the GRF program staff. While we do plan to relay important information and general guidance in the webinars, it is highly recommended that both fellows and institutions and all the institutional reps read the guide and use it as a tool to make informed decisions. So a couple of important announcements. So first off, the Graduate Research Fellowship Program Office is proud to announce the newest GRFP Administrative Guide. It will be released in late April, so I'll be looking for an announcement on that. And beginning in fellowship year 2024, that is this fellowship year, all on-tenure fellows will have the cost of education allowance that goes to the institution. Those will increase by $2,000 for a total of $16,000 per year. And this will take effect on June 1 for summer fellows and September 1 for fall fellows. I will point out that this, again, is going to the institution, and it's up to the institution to spend that as they see fit. But it does help offset some of the costs of your education. Okay, next slide. So having dispensed with that, we're going to segue into some general information about the program. Next slide, please. And we're going to start with some acronyms and terms. And what you will find out pretty quickly, if you have not been introduced to this yet, we at NSF have a sort of shameless fondness for acronyms. And so I'm going to give you a few here and terms, and that should allow you to follow along. And some of these you're going to hear over and over again during your period as a fellow. So it's good to take notes and to memorize some of these. So first off, GRFP, as I'm sure you're aware, is the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. Another acronym you're going to be hearing frequently is AAR. This is the Annual Activity Report. Now, this is not going to concern you for another year, but annually, toward the latter part of the fellowship year, you're going to be required to submit an activity report. Again, that's nothing you have to worry about at this moment, but just be aware that it is a requirement of the program. We will make reference to COE, that's the cost of education allowance that goes to your institution. And as I mentioned, it's being increased. We will make reference to active status. So all active fellows are on tenure, on reserve, or on forfeit. On tenure is when you're in one of your 3 years of funding and actually receiving a stipend from NSF. On reserve is one of those 2 years in your 5-year fellowship period where you're not receiving stipend, but you have access to other things that the Graduate Research Fellowship Program offers. And then you're on forfeit if, for example, you for a period are in a role where you're accepting another stipend. But again, details like this, you don't really need to concern yourself with too much. Just realize that there is the administrative guide and these terms are explained in more detail there. So there are also non-active and retired statuses. So there's completed, that is, you go through your 5-year period and successfully complete the entire deal. Graduated, so if you have earned your graduate degree before the 5-year period is over, you would be in graduated status. And then terminated is if, for some reason, you fail to uphold the requirements of the program and therefore have to be terminated. We've got a couple of leave statuses. One of them is medical, and the other is military. And we will occasionally refer to the GRFP online module. So this is a place where, for example, you fill out your annual activity report. This online module is accessed through research.gov. And finally, for this portion here, intern, we will make reference to intern. This is a funding opportunity that the Graduate Research Fellowship Program participates in. It's an NSF agency-wide opportunity. And it is not an acronym, but it refers to this program or this funding opportunity with the title Non-Academic Research Internships for Graduate Students. Now, we're going to give you more information about that here in a little bit. And just very quickly, some institutional acronyms. You will hear us refer to IHE. This would be the Institution of Higher Education. A CO is a coordinating official. Now, that's your go-to person on your campus for all questions. They may have colleagues who are helping out, and they might have the title alternate coordinating official. And then finally, there's someone who's responsible for all the finances and keeping track of things, and the acronym there would be the FO. Okay. Why don't we go to the next slide? Okay, so we're going to give you a bit of a timeline here. So, as you know, this year the offers were announced the first week of April, and the applicants who have been offered a fellowship have until April 29 to go into the online module and indicate whether or not they're going to accept the offer. And if they do accept the offer, what their status will be in the fall. So whether you're going to immediately start off on tenure or on reserve. Okay. Now, the ability for you to go into the portal and make your acceptance and your declaration, if that is not open to you at the moment, it will be here available relatively soon. And again, you have until April 29 to get that done. Now, there's a reference here to June 1st for summer fellows. If you are an incoming fellow, this doesn't apply to you. All incoming fellows, all new fellows will start as fall fellows, and that period will commence September 1st. So we recognize that our timeline, our dates may not match up absolutely with your academic calendar, but for our purposes, that is when the fall fellowship period is going to start. Okay, one thing. So if you go into the online module, on the splash page there, the home page, you're going to see these reminders and these deadlines, but also there will be reminders emailed to you. And just realize they're going to be sent from GRFP at nsf.gov. And they're going to go to whatever the email address is that we have on file. So you need to make sure that these messages are not getting trapped in your spam filter. And you need to make sure that you have an up-to-date email address and that you check it regularly. I know from personal experience with, for example, relatives of mine who don't necessarily check their email frequently. Please get in the habit of doing that, at least scanning the inbox for things from NSF. Okay. Enough of me. Next slide. So just to alert you to a few things, again, the administrative guide, we've got a new version of it that's going to be coming out here by the end of April, but there is one that's in place, and the information in the current one is going to be valid until we actually release the next one. You will see a link to it, I believe, inside the online module. The online module, again, that's accessed through research.gov. And that's where not only you can access the administrative guide, but then all of your fellowship activities, the declaration, the acceptance, the eventually submitting your annual activities report, all that stuff is done in the module. And then finally, there's a link within that online module to the institution directory. So that's a directory of all GRFP institution officials. So if you have a question about who is the principal investigator for this GRFP award at my institution, or my coordinating official, the first stop is to go to the institution directory. Again, it's inside the module, and you access the module through research.gov. Okay. Next slide. And just to give you some visual clues here, so again, the administrative guide there, if we look down at the two images here, on the left there, that shows you on that welcome page where you're going to find the administrative guide. And if I remember correctly, then just below that is the link to the institutional directory. And then also I need to let you know that by accepting the fellowship, all fellows certify that they have read, understood, and accepted the terms and conditions of the fellowship contained in the fellowship offer letter and in this administrative guide, and that they are aware of the consequences of not complying with the terms and conditions. Okay, so make sure to read it, understand all the terms, and if you have questions, please ask. Okay, next slide. Like I said, so there on the left side, a little bit below the link to the administrative guide, you find the link to the institution directory. And as mentioned, while this fellowship may be arising from the National Science Foundation, it's administered by your institution where you're enrolled. And you are a student of that institution. You must abide by the institution's policies and procedures. And for that reason, the first point of contact is going to be your institution's coordinating official. So if you look down here at these two images on the left there, you see highlighted in yellow, that's the link to the institution directory. When you follow that link, you'll get a page to the right. You'll have a pull-down menu, and you track down that Find Your Institution. You select it, you hit submit, and you get that list of officials. Just be aware that there are some cases where it's a little bit, the official title of the university in our system is a little unusual. For example, University of Massachusetts Boston is University of Massachusetts Boston. However, if I remember this correctly, Boston University is actually under trustees of Boston University. So you may have to look around a little bit, but if you're enrolled at that institution, you're there somewhere in that list. Okay, next slide. One other thing I'll add to that, if you look here and you look all the way to the right, oh yes, Washington State University, go Cougs. Okay, if you look all the way to the right, you see the actual award number. So the institutional directory includes contact information of the CO, of the alternate COs, the principal investigator. It also includes that award number. And if you look in the administrative guide, what you'll find is wording. And if, for example, you publish a paper coming from work that was done while you were a fellow, you're going to want to acknowledge the National Science Foundation, and you will end up acknowledging the NSF and that particular award number. Okay, so if you ever have any reason to look that up, it's actually there in the institution directory. Okay, next slide. Just some quick definitions. The stipend, when a fellow is on tenure, that's when they're going to be receiving the stipend. As I mentioned, the stipends are arising, that money's arising coming from NSF, but it's actually managed and paid out by your institution. So if there are any problems along the way with your stipend, the first point of contact is going to be the coordinating official. So if you have any questions, that's where you go to. I mentioned the cost of education, the COE, that allowance, that is going directly to the institution. Unfortunately, you're likely not going to see that. So part of the benefit that goes along with this, though, is that by accepting this, your institution understands that you are exempt for paying, during years that you're on tenure, that you're exempt from paying any required tuition or mandatory fees that would normally be charged to graduate students of similar academic standing. Your institution of higher education cannot require you to make up the difference between the COE and a higher regular tuition and fee charge. Okay, so keep that in mind. They have agreed to accept that COE in lieu of any tuition and required fees. Okay. I think outlined in your letter, and as I've said earlier, the fellowship period extends for 5 years. Funding is given for 3 of those years, and the other 2 you can be on reserve. Now, among the things that you can do when you're on reserve is you could potentially undertake professional development of different sorts. But it's important that you realize that when you're on reserve, you need to be enrolled as a full-time student, and you've got to be actively engaged in research or coursework or something that is a regular part of the graduate degree program. Okay, next slide. So as I mentioned, I made a vague reference to professional development. You are allowed to pursue professional development opportunities. These could include things like internships or traineeships. What you need to do, though, is make sure that your IHE approves this. And you need to check with them about specific policies pertaining to receiving a graduate research fellowship stipend and any sort of paid activities. One thing that you absolutely need to understand is that being a fellow, by accepting the graduate research fellowship, you cannot accept support or combine it with support from another individual federal graduate fellowship, regardless of whether you're on tenure or on reserve or whatnot. So by that, just as an example, you cannot be a graduate research fellow and during the same period be a Fulbright scholar. Okay. If you have any questions about this, please look in section 2.6 of the GRFP administrative guide. Okay, next slide. So we'll give you a little bit more detail here about the stipend and the scholarly activities. There is actually a distinction here, and I think what's helpful to lay out before I go through this is to realize that the guiding principle here is that we at NSF are trying to make sure that a fellow is not receiving 2 full stipends at the same time from federal sources. That's sort of the one thing we're trying to prevent here. When I say full stipend, that means an entire stipend payment. It's not meant as a what we would call a top-up. That is, if your regular stipend would be higher than what is offered by the Graduate Research Fellowship, your institution can level up, but this is accepting like 2 full stipends from 2 different sources. So if you are you're on tenure and you're accepting that Graduate Research Fellowship stipend, and say, for example, you take an internship with a company. If you're on tenure, what NSF says about any paid internship when the pay is coming from a non-federal source is it's up to your institution to tell you what their rules are. And you need to abide by those rules. However, of course, if you're on reserve and you're not receiving stipend, then you can receive that source. Again, NSF is not particularly concerned about it. Now, if the funding source is federal, that is, you're going to do an internship with, I don't know, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and you're on tenure, and they are offering the stipend, and the stipend is, I guess, better. What NSF says is that in order to accept that other stipend for the period that you would be interning, you need to go on forfeit the stipend for that period in order to accept the Department of Energy stipend. Okay? If you're on reserve, again, you're not receiving payment from NSF, so it's immaterial. And again, as we noted at the bottom, you'll hear it more than once from us. Your graduate research fellowship cannot be concurrently accepted or combined with support from another individual federal fellowship. For example, our favorite example would be the Fulbright. Okay, now I hope I haven't confused everybody with all of this. So, but if I have, let's just move along anyway. Okay, next slide. Okay, we're going to, before you have to, you get the privilege of stop listening to me, I've got a couple of more slides here, and then we'll turn it over to the dulcet tones of my colleague, Dr. Hill. We're going to lay out a little bit of information about some supplemental funding sources. And the first one I'm going to talk about is this program that I help oversee for our graduate research fellows, and this is intern. Now, I mentioned this is this non-academic internship funding opportunity. And if you, for example, would like to get some professional development, some training by going off to a federal lab, or you want to work at a company, you can do that for up to 6 months, and of course has to be approved by your coordinating official and everyone along the way. But you can, to help facilitate this, you can apply for funding to help support you as you do this. Okay, so if you're interested, just realize you have to be a current fellow. You can be either on reserve or on tenure, but you have to be a current fellow. And it's got to be a non-academic internship. So that is not not another university, not a a center or some sort of facility that's directly associated with another university. Okay, this is non-academic. And to be eligible, you must have completed at least one academic year in a graduate program. It can be either at the master's or the doctoral level, but you need to log that before and have satisfactory progress toward the completion of your degree before you're eligible to submit, to have that funding request submitted for you. So why that tortured phrasing there? Well, to submit a request, first stop, once you talk to your thesis advisor, of course, is to contact the coordinating official for your institution. And you absolutely need that, not only to get the necessary approvals, but it's going to be, this has to be submitted as a supplement to the Graduate Research Fellowship Award for your institution. And that means it's got to be done, it's got to be submitted by the principal investigator for that award. And so they're going to submit that request on your behalf. Although you did all the work and you submitted your application and you're funded, you're not actually considered the PI on your own fellowship. So you can't submit this yourself. You need the cooperation and you need the support of the CO and the PI for your institution. Now, if after you consult with the CO and the CO or the PI is confused about anything, then they may contact us using the email address grfpintern@nsf.gov. Okay, that's one of these supplemental funding opportunities. Next slide. Now we've got a couple of more, and one of these is the career life balance supplemental funding source. It's a funding opportunity that may be used in addition to a limited pay leave option on an NSF approved medical leave status. What career life balance is is it's meant to provide support for a fellow who has to go on leave, whether it's for family leave to, provide assistance to someone in their family, or if they're going on their own medical leave. And the funding is used to get technical assistance for a period to allow the thesis work, the experimentation, whatever, to keep going in their absence. Okay, so well, the second award or source of supplemental funding that we'll talk about is the Facilitation Awards for Scientists and Engineers with Disabilities. Now, if you have a recognized disability, if, for example, you've got an accommodation from your university, and there is something, equipment, supplies, that would better enable you to do your work, and the whatever's being done here, whatever's being funded by the source funding would be directly tied not only to relieving the disability, but also to facilitating the work. Then fellows can have their GRF PIs submit a funding request for one of these facilitation awards. Okay. Now, for both of these, to get more information and to get an idea of what's required for the request, you can go to this document called the PAPG. That's the acronym, PAPPG. You can find it. Just go to your favorite search engine and type in NSF and PAPG. It'll pop up, and then go looking for, it's chapter 2, section E, point 7. But really, if you just look for supplemental requests, or just plug in CLB or FASED, you'll find the section and you'll be able to figure out what's required of the PI if they're going to submit one of these awards. Okay, so it's worth checking out. Okay, next slide. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Hill.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schildbach. That was a great introduction to GRFP. There's a lot to listen to and a lot to learn about GRFP. We want to welcome all the new GRFP fellows. We know there's a lot to learn. As Dr. Schildbach mentioned, there's an administrative guide, and by the end of April, you need to accept and declare this year. Let's look at your fellowship responsibilities. Now, where would you accept and declare? That's what you're wondering, right? You need to go to the GRFP online module. And here are some examples of web pages so that you'll kind of see what you're going to be using as a GRFP fellow here at the National Science Foundation. So on the left-hand side, you can see there's something called the login screen. And on the right-hand side, there's something called the profile view. So when you start off in the module, you'll have something like the login screen, okay? And this is where you're going to go into the online module to manage your fellowship. And if there are any required reports or any changes you need to make in your fellowship, this is where you'll go to the module, okay? If you see on the right-hand side, the profile view, this is kind of like the splash sheet. And there are really three major parts to it. There's the quick links part, and we've actually discussed that a little already. Dr. Schildbach mentioned some of the things that are available there. For example, the administrative guide is there, okay? Also, the institutional directory is there. So that's a really good resource because in one place you can quickly get to the the links to those things are right there. And then there's another column sort of in the middle, welcome fellows. And then there's a column on the right, which is kind of like fellowship status for you, customized for you, talking about the information for your profile. But that middle part, welcome fellows, it really has different tasks listed. And these are the things that you need to really be thinking about and really attentive to as part of your fellowship, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit more about this and how you use it and what you need to do starting pretty soon, like by the end of this month, in terms of declaring, first accepting, and then declaring what you're planning on doing for the next year. Okay, so let's take a little deeper dive into this. So here is that page I mentioned. You see on the left is the quick links, and then the welcome fellows, and then the fellow data on the right. All right. So the middle section is the one we're really going to focus on right now. That's where you usually have, you'll see something said, fellows task list. Underneath that, there'll be optional tasks. And those are the two things you really have to focus on. Don't worry about that additional funding opportunity task list. That you won't use that as right now. There would be no use for that. So let's talk a little bit about the fellow task list. This is where you go for declaring and accepting. So let's look at that a little bit more. Okay, welcome fellows. This is now we're zooming in on that middle part. Okay, welcome fellows, and this is where you should go. For example, if you go to the optional task list, that's where you would go if you're going to either, let's say you need to update some information on your profile. Dr. Schildbach mentioned like your email address, that's pretty important. Okay, update your profile. So your email, that kind of thing. If anything changes, go to the module, go to the Welcome Fellows page, go to the optional task list, and then go to update my profile, okay? You'll notice that there's other examples of things that you might do, status request changes, other kinds of things. In fact, your offer letter, you can print your offer letter from here if you need a copy of that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I mentioned that you really have to be thinking right now about your declaring, okay? You need to accept your fellowship and then you need to declare. And remember, declare, as Dr. Schildbach mentioned, it's really letting NSF know whether for the next year, whether you're going to have funding coming from NSF, if you're going to have your stipend, or if you're going to be on reserve, and that is, you're not going to use your stipend. Remember, you have 2 years of reserve and you have 3 years of using your stipend, right? You have to be enrolled as a graduate student in an accredited program, an eligible program. You have to be enrolled, but you have the 5-year fellowship period, right? So what happens is you declare, and based on what your plan is in terms of using or not using the fellowship stipend, a certain amount of money is going to go to your institution. And we're going to be working on that during the summer, making sure all the funding gets to the institutions where the fellows are at. And then it'll be available for you through your institution. Now, one of the things that you'll see on that Welcome Fellows page is that you'll want to declare your fellowship status. Remember, there's tenure, there's reserve, and then there's the possibility of going on leave. And these have been described a little bit already But remember, within the 5 years, basically you're going to be on tenure for up to 3 years and on reserve for 2 years. If during a tenure year, when you're on stipend, you might remember Dr. Schildbach mentioned this. For example, let's say you were on a paid internship, going to go on a paid internship during a tenure year, then that would be a situation where you might need to forfeit some of your stipend so that you can use the funding from another source. Okay, so a forfeit is a loss of stipend. You don't get that back. It isn't saved until later on. During that tenure year, if there's a couple months where you're not going to use the stipend, you call that forfeit because you might have some other funding that's replacing it. Remember that you can do this. For example, you could be on reserve next year, or you could be on tenure, and you have 2 years of reserve, 3 years of tenure. During the 2 years on reserve, you could, for example, take advantage potentially of something like the intern opportunity. You might look into something like that for a reserve year, for example. Now, there are situations where while you're enrolled as a graduate student, you might need to go on leave. You still need to be enrolled as a graduate student, but there are 2 types of leave connected with the GRFP. One is military leave, and one is medical leave. Okay, and you'll need institutional. You'll have to be receive approval from your institution for it to be on leave, and you must remain enrolled as a student connected with that. It's really important. Just want to really emphasize that when you go in as a first-year student, a first-year fellow, when you need to accept, but beyond accepting, you have to declare. It's a 2-step process. Now, after your first year, you won't have to accept anymore, but there are still going to be 2 things you're going to need to do. At the end of your first year of your fellowship, you'll have to submit an activities report, and you'll have to declare again. So every year you declare. The first year you have to accept and declare. The rest of the years you have to declare and you have to submit your annual activity report. Now, sometimes during your fellowship period, remember you have 5 years potentially as a fellow, you might need to change your status in some way. Okay, so you can make a change request to NSF. Okay, so what would be examples of those kinds of things? Well, one change request might be, let's say you need to notify us that you're changing a field of study, okay, or that you're transferring to a new institution. So change requests have to be approved by your coordinating official at your institution prior to NSF approval. Okay. One thing about that is good to make sure you have clear is that as a first-year student, you can make a change request for a field of study within the subfield of your major field of study, but you can't change the major field of study. After the first year, you could make a change request for a major field of study, so a change in your major field. It still would have to be something funded by NSF, right? It had to be a STEM field or STEM education, but that's possible in terms of the major field after your first year, your second or third, fourth, fifth year. The first year, you can only make changes within the subfields within your major field. So the other thing I mentioned was change of institutions. And it's possible that there are different scenarios for this. For example, it might be, one example would be, let's say you start off with a fellowship working on your master's degree, you get your master's, and you still have fellowship period left. Okay, it only took 1 or 2 years. You still have your 5 years. You still have the rest of the 5 years, and you could potentially go to a different institution, right? A different university. So there are a couple rules connected with this. And remember, this is all an overview. More details are provided in the admin guide, okay, in the administrative guide. But if you're going to switch from one institution to another, you can't have like a big break. You can't like wait 3 years, get your master's, wait 3 years, and then go someplace. You gotta be enrolled in that other program pretty quickly. So usually what we describe it as it can't be a significant break. And what we mean by that is it can't be more than one academic term. So for example, if you graduated in May and you're going to start at a new institution the next fall, that would be, the spring and the summer term, that would be okay. And then you start in the fall term, that would be fine. And of course, if you transfer to another institution, you still have to follow all the rules, right? It has to be a graduate program that has an approved field of study. You have to be enrolled in that program. Okay. Now, the change of degree plan, I mentioned this already. This is the subfield and the major field, okay? And you might remember this connected with your application. If you need a reminder right now, you could go to the back of the solicitation. You probably remember that solicitation. There's an appendix there, and you'll see there are these major fields, right? And then within that, under those major fields, there are a list of subfields, okay? So when we talk about changes field of study, we're talking about either those subfields or those major fields. And a subfield then is a change within the major field, and a major field is really a significant change of scope, okay, from what the original application was. You can do that, but only after the first year. Changes in the major field of study during the first year are not permitted. Bold, underline, bottom line, okay? Leave requests. I mentioned that there are 2 types of leave request. Remember, military and medical, okay? So the administrative guide provides some more details about this, but here's an overview for you. You can request a leave, right? All leave requests should include the number of months that you're going to be on leave. And you have to, this is a change request, okay? And you have to make the change request at the start of your leave and when you come back from leave, okay? You have to let us know that you're back from leave and whether you want to go back on tenure or back on reserve, okay? So for military leave, there are certain rules, and for medical leave, there are certain rules. Military leave, you have to submit a copy of your duty orders to your coordinating official at your university. You don't have to send them to NSF, okay? And you don't have to give us any of that kind of sensitive information, but you do have to submit a copy of the duty orders to the coordinating official. Now, for the medical leave, you should, the first thing you should do is contact your coordinating official, the person at your institution, and make sure that you can get an institutionally approved medical or family leave. And that'll be based on whatever the requirements are at your institution. Okay, that's step 1. You have to get an institutional medical leave, right? And there is a possibility of getting a paid leave option with this. The paid leave is for up to 3 months. And that those 3 months are part of your tenure 3 years. So they're not extra months of tenure. Okay, they're within that. Okay. And when you do provide a request to NSF connected with medical leave, you don't have to provide us with a lot of information about the details about why you're asking for that, the reasons behind it. That's something that would be connected with your institution. So we need basically the number of months, and your institution will have all the other relevant information. So the main thing I would say here in terms of kind of the basic message is you need to coordinate this with your coordinating official, right? Go talk to them and make sure that you submit what's required at your institution, and then do the necessary steps that are in the GRFP module too. More information about this is in the administrative guide. Now this year, as a new fellow starting your first year, remember you have to accept and declare, okay? But next year, at about this time, as April 25 comes around, 2025 comes around, that's when you'll have to declare, just like this year. But instead of accepting, you have to do an annual activities report. So you always do the D word, declare. This year you do A for accept. Next year you do AA for annual activities report, AAR, okay? So you have to do this report. It doesn't matter if you were on tenure or reserve, okay? Even if you're on leave, you need to send us an activity report, an AAR, okay? So for new fellows, starting this year, when you'll start in the fall with your fellowship, you would submit an AAR in the spring, about this time next year. And you're saying, okay, I want to get working on that. Where is that going to be? Well, it's going to be under that Welcome Fellows list. Submit for your activities report. That's where you'll put that. And what are you going to put in there? You fill it out online. And it includes your research accomplishments, in kind of the activities during your fellowship period, okay? And there's a menu connected with it. It includes like, list your presentations, list any publications, any teaching or research assistantships, any recognitions, those kinds of things. Now, one of the steps, important steps connected with your AAR will be getting your academic advisor to sign that, okay? And if there's, at this time next year, you've got it all filled out and your academic advisor isn't available for some reason, this is a good example of talking to your coordinating official, find out what would be an alternate option, okay, to make sure you get that signed, okay? And remember, this is one of those things like the change requests and the declaration and the acceptance that you do in the module, okay? It's really important to do your AAR, right? Just like some of these other things, this is a requirement of the fellowship. You need to do this, okay? Now, Dr. Shieldbach mentioned that there are other terms that we use to kind of describe where you are in terms of your fellowship. And fellowship completion is one of those terms. So when you complete your fellowship, you need to go into the module and let us know that, okay? So you need to make a change request for that, okay? There are really 3 types of versions of this. There's completed with degree. That is, let's say after 3 years, you've completed your degree and you're going to not use your fellowship anymore. Okay, you're not going to use all 5 years. Okay, so in that situation, you would have to go in and let us know. Okay, so that would be one thing, completed with degree. Another example would be, well, the time runs out. You've used the 5 years of the fellowship. You're still in grad school, but in terms of the fellowship, you've done that. You've completed, and you would go in and declare that and submit a change request for that. And then if for some reason you no longer want your fellowship, that or the requirements aren't being met, that would be a situation where we use the term terminated. Okay, so you can voluntarily terminate, or there can be other reasons for a termination. Well, you've heard a lot from NSF today, and we're going to, I think, are we going to take a little poll now? See who's been paying attention?
Yes, we are.
Is that okay? Let's do it. Thanks for listening. And here's a little bit of some questions for you, and then we'll see if you have any questions for NSF. Okay. Lindsay?
It should
Rochelle?
be, yes. It should be appearing on their screen now.
There
Our six
th-
questions.
there are 6 questions.
Mhm. For all true or false. Just need to go through all 6 questions, please.
It's great to see so many people taking the quiz. About half the people have taken it so far. We've still got over 100 people that need to take the quiz. Looks like there's about 1.5 minutes left, and we're coming close to the number of people that are participating now. I don't know.
Only got 40 left.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Things are slowing down there, Lindsay.
It looks like it. All right, I'll just go ahead and end it. Oh,
Are you going to review this?
yes,
Okay.
in the poll. And then we will go to the,
Says 95% participated.
okay. The answers are on the screen, Dr.
Okay. So here are the answers. First one, you can change the status from tenure to reserve during a fellowship year. You can change status from tenure to reserve during a fellowship year. That is false. If you're on tenure and you don't want to use your stipend, the thing you would do is forfeit. Okay, you don't go on reserve. Think of it as 12-month blocks of being on tenure or a 12-month block of being on reserve. If you're on tenure and getting your funding, and for some reason you want to lose a couple of those months, you would forfeit. Okay. You don't get that back. It doesn't get tacked on later on. You just lose it. Okay. Question 2. You cannot change from reserve, that is not getting stipend, to tenure, that is getting stipend, during a fellowship year. You cannot change from reserve to tenure. Is that really true? You cannot change from reserve to tenure? That would be true.
That's actually supposed to be true. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. You're just checking to see if I'm reading these things, huh, Lindsay? Okay. So that one, as written, is true, not false. Okay.
78%.
You have to keep it in 12-month increments. Okay. I know you're just checking up on me there. Okay. Let's say you are a first-year student. Okay. That you're a first-year graduate student. True or false? I cannot change my major field of study. That is true. You cannot change your major field of study. Okay, same situation. I am a first-year student. You are a first-year. I can change my subfield within my major field of study. That is true. True and true. Okay. Second to last question. If I have a question, the first point of contact is to email the NSF GRP mailbox. That is false. Your first point of contact is your CO, your coordinating official at your institution. Read the administrative guide. If you have a question, talk to your coordinating official. If your coordinating official can't help you, say, coordinating official, is this something you should contact NSF about? Okay, so you read the administrative guide, then check with the coordinating official, and then the coordinating official can talk to NSF if there still needs to be some clarification, okay? And the final question. Let's say I am starting my first year. I need to submit an annual activities report? The answer to that is no, false. You do not have to submit the annual activity report this year. You're all free and clear if you are just starting off. What you need to do is accept and declare. You must declare, not just accept. You must accept and declare. Thank you for taking our poll. 95% of you took it, and I hope you all had the right answers. There's going to be another webinar later on in the month, very close to the deadline, and that will be on April 26th. It's going to be about fellow declaration. As the sign says, this is recommended for new fellows. You don't necessarily have to, if they watch this one, have they got pretty much what they're going to get?
Yes.
Yes, that's what, so you've got it, but if you want to have it reinforced, there's going to be another one in a couple weeks, okay? Now, we're going to try to answer some questions. There's hundreds of people, really hundreds and hundreds of you out there that are interested in all the rules connected with GRFP and your fellowship, right? Now, each one of you might have some very specific questions that we might be able to answer, or you might be able to answer yourself if you look at the administrative guide. And then if you can't find it in the administrative guide, talk to your coordinating official. And sometimes your coordinating official will say, well, given this and this and this is the answer, okay? That is, it might be a fairly involved set of questions that have to be asked to get to the answer that fits your exact situation. And because we have hundreds of people online today, we're not going to answer those kinds of questions. We're going to try to keep it at the kind of question that might be useful for more people, okay? So if you have very specific questions, first, read the administrative guide. Second, what? Go to talk to your coordinating official. And today, let's see what kinds of questions we can answer, and that you can ask that might be helpful to not only you, but to your colleagues, other people that receive the fellowship or are going to accept and declare so they can get the fellowship. I'm joined by a whole group of experts here at the National Science Foundation. I want to mention that Lindsay and Rochelle have already spoken a little bit, and Dr. Shieldbach has spoken, and we also have Dr. Norman, and we have Chris Cruz and Nikki Clark. These are people that have a lot of knowledge about GRFP, and we're all here to help you today, okay? So that you can start off with your first steps into GRFP will be successful and confident steps. Okay.
Thank you, Joe. We are also allowing you to raise your hand if you would like to answer any of these questions verbally, but otherwise we will go run through our Q&A that we have marked to answer live. So again, feel free to raise your hand if you would like. So we'll go with the first question. Does the change request portal close during the declaration period? Excuse me.
What's a good answer for that, team? Does the change request portal close during declaration? Nikki, Chris, Rochelle?
The declaration portal for continuing fellows, the change request is not available until you have declared. Once you have declared, then the change request functionality is available.
There you go. That's why we have Chris here. She knows how it works. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, we will start. If you're Nicholas Mortimer, you can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello.
I must have clicked the hand by accident, but I do have a question, which is, if you have a very small subfield change, for example, biochemistry to cell biology, when you're going into your graduate program, is that a change that you would like us to make, or is that really necessary if both are more or less accurate for your degree program of study?
Well, you should look at what you submitted on your application and what's in the back of the solicitation, that list. And if it's a change within the major field, but it's a subfield change, then you should go through the process.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's a good question also, based on that general rule and what you can read in the administrative guide, which is essentially what I just summarized. Those are the kinds of things you could talk to your coordinating official about a little bit, okay, to have some more confidence in that process.
Okay, we will move on to the next question. There is a question that Joel marked. If I applied for the geosciences field of study and will be attending a mechanical engineering program, are there extra steps I need to take to accept GRF? Oh,
Well, Dr. Schildbach, would you like to answer that since you marked it as something?
So the guidance here would be to go back to the solicitation, check on your application what you actually indicated, and realize that there are subfields and there are major fields. And the switch out of, and I believe I was lost here, my apologies, but the switch out of engineering into something that is, well, what would NSF would be considered, for example, chemistry, those would be major changes or changes in major fields and would not be allowed in the first year. So you need to make absolutely certain of what you had marked and what the precise, what the categories are as they're indicated in the appendices for the appendix for the solicitation. But generally, no, a shift in major fields is not allowed.
thank you, Dr. Shieldbach. We will allow Kalai Benyako. If you can go ahead, you should be able to unmute yourself if you can ask your question.
Hi, I was wondering if there's major field of study, but I was wondering if major fields of study encompass different physical PhD majors, like maybe materials research encompasses chemistry as your PhD major or a material science PhD. I was wondering if there could be clarification on that. Major field of study versus actual PhD major.
So probably Dr. Schildbach's answer before would be the best guide for this. The first thing to do is to look at the back of the solicitation, and you will see listed major fields of study, and then you'll see subfields within that. And for example, if it's engineering, okay, then there'll be a list of engineering, okay. If it's chemistry, there'll be a list connected with that. The first year, you have to stay within that block, okay? If you look at the major field and it has to be within that same block. You can't jump to another major field, okay? And it connects with the degree programs. So you need to see is it an engineering degree program or a chemistry degree program or a biology degree program? So there's a list of major fields and you'll see those. And if the first year, you can't move from one major block to another major block, and your degree program has to be within that major field that you listed on your application.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Our next question is, if a veteran uses their GI Bill, do they have to forfeit their GRFP tenure?
I don't think that I think that's a form of financial aid and is not a fellowship. So it's not an individual fellowship. And my understanding, and there might be other people here that have additional or better information than that. But this is an example. I would start with maybe asking the coordinating official, but I believe that if it's a form of financial aid, then it's not something that's something you have to forfeit the tenure for.
Yeah, if you go into the administrative guide, there is a section on veterans benefits, and I'm not going to give you the section and title of the US Code, but it states that but I got it right here because of the fine people who wrote the administrative guide. It states that educational benefits from the Department of Veterans Affairs may be received concurrently with fellowship support. The receipt of educational benefits from the Veterans Administration is allowed by NSF as payment supplementary to fellowship support.
That's a very
So-
excellent question. Thanks, Joel. What would you want to emphasize something there?
That, thank goodness I had the administrative guide open.
That is
so I
a
could
very
search it.
handy dandy thing.
Just sort of underscoring earlier comments. So please, please realize it's there.
That's a great question.
But it's a fabulous question.
We have a live question. Cherie McVeigh, you can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for answering my question. As part of the acceptance, I was reading, it says you have to be a full-time student enrolled in a full-time graduate degree. Now, when it comes to the graduate degree, do you consider a 6 credit hours a full-time student or a 9 credit hour? Or does it depend on the institution?
Yes, you need to check with your institution. And if you read the administrative guide, you'll notice that when we talk about enrollment and full-time enrollment, and I'm glad you noticed that, it's very important that you be enrolled full-time, that what we're going to use are the transcripts and your register's official definition of what's full-time, okay, for a graduate student, right? So check with, I would start with your coordinating official and work as a team to make sure you get the right information about that.
Perfect,
But
I appreciate it.
You bet.
Would you mind if I ask one more question? If not, that's okay.
I think it's okay.
My other question is, while I'm on tenure, can I accept a graduate assistantship, like a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship?
The general answer is that this can be done if it's to promote your educational progress. Okay, so the kind of I'd say detailed or specific language is an administrative guide, but there are situations where this is allowed. It can't, for example, you might be in a situation where your institution, the degree program actually requires it, right? As part of your degree program and your degree progress, that you have a teaching assistantship, because that's considered a valuable component of your education. And under those kinds of circumstances, NSF allows that kind of activity. As I say, it is a really good question, and there is some more information about that in the administrative guide. So read that, and if you aren't sure if your situation fits it, talk to your coordinating official. Both of you sit down, read it, and see if you feel confident about what the next step would be.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, the next question is, can I take a private job, research job, outside of an internship privately while still on tenure for only 10 hours a week?
Well, there are going to be some questions asked about this. So this is kind of gets into the, well, maybe I have to ask a couple of extra questions, and some of the other people here online might have something to say about this. But in general, remember some of the rules we've talked about. You need to be enrolled full-time in a graduate program, right? You're getting a stipend to be enrolled full-time doing your education and research connected with your education, all right? And there'll be institutional rules, and you need to follow those. So those are some of the things to talk about. I would, again, start with the coordinating official and a look at the administrative guide connected with those kinds of situations, okay? And it's possible we could refine our answer here, but I might have to ask like 5 or 6 more questions to make sure I gave an answer that was pretty close to what would be expected. There might be somebody else as part of the NSF team that wants to add something to that. But I would say this is a good example where sit down with your coordinating official and look at the administrative guide and see if you feel like you can come up with the information that way to begin with.
Okay, we'll move to the live questions. And Tony Sikorsky, you can unmute yourself. And Tony Sikorsky,
Yes, the hand is up and
there he is.
yeah,
Can you hear me okay?
yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. So I've looked through the administrative guide and I think I just need a little bit more clarity here regarding private summer internships. So if I'm on tenure for a 12-month period and then I get an offer, do I have to forfeit my GRFP for those 3 months or not?
Well, the general rule, you might remember what Dr. Shieldbach mentioned. The main message we have here at NSF is that in terms of the stipend you're receiving from NSF, is that we don't want you to be getting a parallel duplicating stipend from another federal resource. The taxpayers aren't supposed to be paying 2 stipends for you. Okay, so that's the main rule. Okay, now there might be other rules at your institution, and so I can't kind of dive into that. But the other main principle is that during your fellowship period, you're supposed to be enrolled full time, and you are supposed to be working on your education and your research. Okay. Is there anything else that Dr. Shieldbach, I see you're just jumping to say something maybe, or Dr. Norman, anybody else want to emphasize something here? Dr. Norman?
I could just emphasize, as long as you're looking at the administrative guide, you ask questions about the administrative guide, the rules for GRFP and institutional rules, your private life is kind of your private life. As long as it's not interfering with anything associated with GRFP or the institution, as they have things outlined, then a lot of that stuff you do on your own is stuff you do on your own.
Yeah. If you follow our requirements, that's all we're asking you to do, right? That's what Dr. Norman's saying.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Because I was looking at it and I didn't see much about that. I mean, it seems like it's fully institutionally based, whether you can take a private internship or not, on the condition that it contributes to your thesis research. But thank you for answering my question.
Sure. And good luck with your fellowship.
Next question. If you have to make a change when you're on tenure, after accepting and declaring, can that be done? For an example, I have signed up for fall, but I might need to start in spring.
Okay, so this is a good example where the more details you provide, the more I'm not quite sure if we can provide an answer right now, right? Okay, because there are a couple things going on. Like if you have accepted and declared right now, you can go back in right now while the declaration period is open, and you can change your declaration, okay? On the other hand, it sounded like, so that was kind of like the first half of the question. And then, but the second part of the question connected with like changing from tenure to reserve halfway through a fellowship year. And that is not the kind of thing that can happen. You can forfeit, but you can't change from tenure to reserve. So this is exactly the kind of question, you know, read the administrative guide. If you have a scenario that might be slightly complicated, then talk to your coordinating official and make sure that you are very clear on it. But up until the time to the 29th of April, if you just want to change your declaration from reserve to tenure, that's perfectly okay. Okay, you'll be able to do that. I hope that's a little bit helpful. But there are some questions that might have to be asked that are better for you to start with your coordinating official instead of maybe, I mean, there's hundreds of other people listening, and maybe we'll try to answer more general questions right now.
I could just add that sometimes you have a list of things that you want to accomplish, and it may be a good idea to sit down and talk to your mentor, who maybe can help you to see when's the best time to do those things, and probably give you some advice of how things might work together. Then for questions that follow, you can ask your coordinating official, does this work out? So you can have confidence in whatever decision you make.
Well, that's a great idea. And I haven't been saying too much about like their academic advisor or their research PI or anything like that. But that's another member of your team, right? Or other members of your team. So it's maybe very likely that those people aren't your coordinating official. So there are lots of people at your institution there that are really pulling for you to be successful and are invested in helping you with your graduate education, and you're helping you achieve the very best education at your institution. And Dr. Norman has reminded us that besides your coordinating official, who's kind of the person with GRFP, right? The main person there, that your graduate education, the overall graduate education, there's a team of people that can serve as mentors and people you should talk to. Thanks, Dr. Norm.
Our next live question is Danielle Pacheco.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
I just had a follow-up to the change request portal question. I think was the first question addressed. And I was wondering, what should continuing fellows do when they're graduating within the current NSF year, but they didn't submit a change request before the declarations period started? Because now that it's closed, they don't really need to declare for the upcoming year since they're graduating now. What is the best course of action for those students?
Yeah, I know there are people here that probably can answer this better than I can. But based on what you said, if a person is a continuing fellow and they have already completed or are completed within a fellowship period, how do they declare? I don't know the exact detail. It might be somebody else here can answer that. It is a kind of a slightly detailed question, and it might be better to ask your coordinating official to ask the program office for specifics on that. So I apologize that I just don't want to give you the wrong answer. I think I might have the steps involved, but I don't want to get out on that limb in case I guide you down the wrong sequence of actions. Is there somebody here that could answer that right now, or is the best advice to start with the coordinating official?
Yes, so start with the coordinating official and have an email into the mailbox.
Okay. I hope that at least gives you a plan, right? So start off with that, and I hope that that's a little bit helpful.
Thank you.
The next question is
Rochelle.
yeah.
We've reached 3:30.
It's 3:30. I'm sorry. Do you guys want to take one more? Are you ready to cut it here?
Lindsay, what would you like to do?
I have to leave, but if you guys would like
Okay.
to.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, okay, Lindsay.
We can talk here.
The last
Okay.
one.
You want to take the last one now, Krisha?
Yeah, we'll take the last one. Then
Okay.
we'll leave.
Okay. If my graduate university provides a 9-month fellowship for my first year study, can I accept this while I declare my NSF status as on reserve for the year?
Okay, well, this is, again, a little bit detailed and there might be follow-up questions. But there are situations where you can be on reserve and you can receive funding from your institution. And I don't know if that's exactly what you're describing here. And again, we might have to ask a couple other questions. But there is a situation where that's often the kind of just situation I described is often what happens on a reserve year is that you're getting funding from another source. And typically one example that might be an internal university source. And that's okay. That's partly what's the reserve year can be used for. If that is the case, and I'm not sure it is, because I might have to ask a couple more questions to get some more information. But if that's the situation, then it might be fine. And so talk to your coordinating official about that and make sure that all the details connected with this question are answered and that they all follow the administrative guide. And I hope that maybe that's a good way to end, is that just a reminder that we're all very proud of you and your accomplishments. It's a great achievement to get to where you are now, to be ready to go to graduate school. You did a lot of hard work and a lot of people worked to help you with your application in terms of writing letters. And there were reviews done by the NSF team. And it's a great thing to get this fellowship, and it's a great thing that you're going to be able to use it for your graduate education. We're all hoping that you'll do a terrific job with your graduate studies, and we want to help you and by letting you know what the rules are and what steps you should take if you have questions. And as we've hope you've heard, the first thing is to be a student of that administrative guide, and there will be a new one. So there will be, you need to check on any revisions that might happen. And then if you have questions, talk to your coordinating official. And we hope that that's the start of a great fellowship funded by the National Science Foundation. And we just really wish you the very, very best. Dr. Norman, Dr. Schulbach, anybody else want to say a goodbye or something to the fellows out there, the upcoming fellows?
Just congratulations. It's a lot of competition. So hope you are as proud of yourself as we are of you, and hope you have an amazing graduate school experience.
And there are a million questions here, but a lot of them, that we weren't able to get to, but a lot of this, especially the taxes questions, are actually covered in the administrative guide. So please check it out.
We work really hard to make the administrative guide clear and helpful for you. And it's a good first place to start. It really has a lot of this kind of information. Okay.
And
Rochelle,
congratulations.
want to take us
Yes.
out?
Yes, thank you, everyone. This concludes our webinar for today. Please keep in mind we have a follow-up webinar later this month that you can reattend if you'd like. But as of now, you all can log off. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Congratulations.